Okay, all right. So, Chinese city stripped of civilized status after assault sparks outrage over male violence. And this is actually a story I talked about before on the channel. I mean, I haven't made into like a topic, I don't think. But I talked about like this incident and how just devastating it is. So this is an attack that happened in a restaurant in this city, Tangshan, and got captured on closed circuit TV. So I'm gonna show you this. You just see this shit, right? Like, it's pretty vile. So, like, you know, a trigger warning for, you know, sensitive content. So here we go. There's no sound for the thing. So but hold on, maybe there's no sound for the actual footage, but maybe there's a news report on this top of this. Let's see.
Camera video at a restaurant shows a man approaching 3 women. When he touches one of them, she shakes him off, and he slaps her. What happens next is brutal. A mob beating her and the other women. Bystanders appear to do little to stop it. She's dragged outside by the hair, and when her friend tries to help, her head hits the step with a thump. The savage attack left 2 women hospitalized and sparked outrage across Chinese social media about gender-based violence here and how often it happens in plain view. More women are using their voices, says activist Feng Yuan, but our voices need to be heard, which is very hard. For over a week, women have flooded messaging platforms. Hashtags about the topic on Weibo alone have been viewed nearly 5 billion times. And other videos have quickly surfaced. According to police, this one shows a brawl in Huizhou after a woman there was beaten.
In a way, the rise of women's rights consciousness in China is quite rapid, faster than a lot of other countries. So I think that kind of the feeling of threat from men is especially acute.
But feminism is a divisive topic here. State media coverage has downplayed gender as the cause, instead linking the Tangshan attack to organized crime. Government censors pulled down the video, and Weibo yanked more than 900 accounts for violations, including gender confrontation. Police made 9 arrests and rolled out what was billed as a thunderstorm campaign to assure residents it was safe to eat out again. Tangshan was even dropped from China's honorary list of, quote, civilized cities. Yet in all the fallout and discussion, what's missing is the women. Nearly 2 weeks after the attack, they haven't been seen or heard from, and no relatives have spoken out, stirring concerns and more questions here around what's being called an epidemic of violence against women. Authorities here just released a report that reveals the condition of 2 of the women was far more serious than first acknowledged, that they spent time in intensive care, even after police described their injuries as minor. Officials did not respond to our request for more details about the women, their families, or their ensuing silence about an attack that has so many others talking.
So, yeah. Yeah, that was pretty horrific. Yeah, hey, Plushналity, at least good they're speaking out in outrage, and becoming a trending issue, to be vocal about it. Yeah, so this was, yeah, this is pretty vile. There's no 2 ways about it. This was, pretty messed up, man. So, yeah, these women suffered a vicious attack, and like I thought it was the full video. The NBC has 2 videos. It has like the raw footage, but like this was a full news report, which is fine. But the raw footage, like it shows that went on longer than than was shown there, and really like messed up those women. Apparently, there's pictures of some of the women being taken out by an ambulance, and like they're all swollen and stuff, and it's really bad. And again, 2 of them are in intensive care at this point in time. And then there was another attack, and this it wasn't clear to me if it's an area within the same city or like another area, like another city altogether. I wasn't actually sure about that. But I thought the thing that I found interesting enough to talk about now is this thing. Chinese city stripped of civilized status after assault sparks outrage over male violence. Okay, so I want to go into the article for more detail. Oh my god, this is being weird. Hold on, let me hold on 1 second. There we go. All right. So a Chinese city has been stripped of its honorary civilized status after a group of men beat 4 women outside of a restaurant this month. So it talks about the assault, but you've heard most of this in the you already heard of this in that broadcast. But and on Wednesday, the civilization, because there's a response by the Chinese government, and on Wednesday, the civilization office of the Central Communist Party committee removed the city from the country's honorary list of civilized cities. National civilized cities are selected on 8 criteria, including good social order and a healthy upward moving social atmosphere, according to the office's official website. Tangshan has been awarded the status 4 times since 2011, more recently in 2020. The committee's decision is the latest in a series of official responses to the attack and to the waves of anger it has provoked online. The Hebei Provincial Security Authority on Tuesday launched a disciplinary review investigation into the Tangshan Police Bureau's response to the incident. Yeah, so that's it for that part. Is there anything else? No, I think so. That's good. Yeah, so this national civilized cities, right? So it's like, it seems to be an award. It's not clear to me what you get for being on it. Maybe it's just like city pride. It's not very clear to me. Maybe you will get some sort of special benefits, maybe special funding. I don't know. And good social order, by Chinese standards, may not be something that we want to emulate necessarily, because their idea of social order, involves like not questioning Communist Party, right? There's not like rebellious acts within there, right? And lots of things seem rebellious to the Chinese Communist Party, right? I think maybe even like homosexual activity would probably take them off this list, right? Let's say people were trying to push for gay rights. I would imagine that they wouldn't make that list. So, but still, there's a list, and it's an official list, right? So it's not like in the U.S. we have like newspapers that like award like these are the 10 best cities to live in, right? The 10 safest cities or something like that, right? Where a third-party organization has collated some data, usually from a U.S. Census Bureau, and then put up this list, right? But this is an official list by the government saying that your city is exceptional for whatever the criteria are. What I think is interesting here is the idea of collective punishment. So I'm not sure how big the city is, though we could probably find out. But the idea that everyone has to suffer because of this attack, right? Because of male violence. I'm actually split on how I feel about it. So let's see. Actually, let's search this thing. Top Tangshan, there's a civilized. Okay, Tangshan government. This is from the this is from the government itself, actually. And it shows us where it's at. Let's see if we can go open Wikipedia. I'm not sure how much of this you can see, but it's, how big is the city? Yeah, how big is the city? Population. Where's urban density? I don't see population here, but maybe my eyes are missing it. Let's see. Population. Oh, okay. 2020 census. Oh, here it is. 7.7 million. 7.7 million individuals. It's a huge city. That's a prefecture level city. Yeah, I guess that's probably it. That's huge. That rivals any American city. All right, it surpasses so many of our American cities, and they have all lost this status because of this attack, right? Because the attack that we just discussed. Like, it seems kind of harsh, right? Like I think the violence that we saw was disgusting, but take it away from everyone for this, I don't know. And not to mention everyone who's being cracked down upon. So in a past article I reading about this, it's like multiple officials were fired, like Chinese Communist Party officials were fired for this. And they're investigating the police and the police response, and who knows what the police may or may not have done. They weren't on site for this, but I'm curious. Maybe like if when they got on site, they let the attackers go, because that might be a thing to investigate them for. It's like, why'd you let them go? But that's speculation. I don't know why they're investigating those guys. But still, there's just more examples of group punishment for a terrible incident. But in a population that is, in a society that is more group culture oriented rather than an individualized culture like the U.S. has, and many Western nations have. Like, does this make sense? And could we expand on this, right? Like, is this something that we could use here in the States? This idea of collective punishment, like that we are all responsible, right, for the things that happen in our community. Like, because another thing that was outrageous about this that people found is that other people didn't step in, right? There was a group of these guys smacking these women, and other people kind of just like sat there and watched. You go back in that footage, especially when the woman gets dragged out by her hair to the outside. There's a lot of other people who were there. They don't step in. They don't do anything. It's a tough situation because it's not clear to me, one, if this actually is a gang, right? So if you remember from the report, they said that they are the Chinese government is downplaying the idea this is gendered violence, right? And in fact censoring that kind of discussion, but saying this is gang-related violence. Okay, well, it seems to me that those men, there's like, so far they've arrested 9 people, and it seems that that's about the number that were there. But yeah, like those 9 men, they actually could have been part of a gang. What if they were well known in that area? And you know, it's like, well, I know these guys are trouble. What am I going to do as an individual? This is a terrible situation, but like if I step in, will other people back me up, right? Can I actually save this woman, or will I get hurt? But that's part of it too, right? Like, should we have some sort of I guess not emphasis, but like encouragement, maybe to a certain extent, not requirements per se, but incentive to act within a collective manner. I don't know, right? to say that, well, we can't allow this to happen in our neighborhood because this reflects poorly on us and me as an individual, right? Like your bad behavior, so that we are all kind of our brother's keeper, you know, for a biblical reference. I think it's an interesting concept. I think it's super interesting. So I'm curious what you all have to say. Hey, co-learning. Hey, how are you? Says that Janet's kind of wow. It was trending, but then censorship. Yeah. The government response is just so sad. Hey, Seal Team Raz, a fantastic mod here. Thank you, Wick, for those numbers. Yeah, I like completely missed my eyes, just like passed over that. But yeah, Talon the Silverhawk, click. Hey, what up, buddy? Thanks for being around. Not unless you whiff to have. I don't know what you're writing there. Could you rewrite that sentence, Talon? Like, I'm not sure what you're trying to say with the kangaroo courts. Gluar says that's a thing in China. It's because of communism, and they aren't sure if that would be kidnapper as a CCP government official or not. Kidnapper? What are you talking about? Kidnapper? I'm not sure what you're talking about. You font mess with the ones in the CCP. I don't know. You can't mess. What are you trying to write there, Gluar? So to me, I heard this article. Yeah, where they ganged up on a woman, right? Indeed. In fact, I can put the I can put this link in the chat, so you guys can check it out. Like, that's the link yourself. So in case you missed, hey Rob Noor. Hey Rob Noor. Thank you for the raid. Hey Rob Noor. Thanks for that. We've been trying to get Rob Noor back on the show for a while. Seal Team Raz also shouting him out. Thank you, Seal Team Raz is always on top of it. I should have known. Enjoy the stream. Yes, I hope you enjoyed your stream, Rob Noor, and I hope to see you here sometime in the future. Right? Hope we could do that. So busy, man. It's crazy with my work. Yeah, I know. I understand. But you know, I'll keep sending you invites, Rob. I'd really like to talk with you again. It's been a long time, but you know, we would have pretty good conversation, pretty fun conversations, in my opinion. So anyway, thank you so much, and you have a fantastic night. Everyone coming through Rob Noor, thanks for being here. My name is Prime, in case you don't know, and we have discussions of various topics here, political topics. We're talking about a vicious attack that happened in China. Actually, it was an attack on a group of women in China, and it was really bad. And talking about like what should happen after that, and we're talking about maybe collective punishment. Does that actually make sense? So we'll get into it. And in fact, I'll just show you guys the video again, so you guys can be caught up on what we're talking about. But anyway, we have discussions and we have open panels where people can join in, jump in, right? So if you'd like to be a part of that, hit that follow button. Right now, make sure notifications on so you know I'm going live. ! Social and chat for our social media. Check us out on all our social medias there. But thank you for being a part of this. All right, let's like the punishment as asinine. So I'll just, for the people who just wrote in, I'll play that video again. It's only 2 minutes long, and maybe I won't even play the whole thing. But this is an attack that happened in China. This is a restaurant in China. So yeah.
The security camera video at a restaurant shows a man approaching 3 women. When he touches one of them, she shakes him off, and he slaps her. What happens next is brutal. A mob beating her and the other women. Bystanders appear to do little to stop it. She's dragged outside by the hair, and when her friend tries to help, her head hits the step with a thump. The savage attack left 2 women hospitalized and sparked outrage across Chinese social media about gender-based violence here and how often it happens in plain view. More women are using their voices, says activist Feng Yuan, but our voices need to be heard, which is very hard. For over a week, women have flooded messaging platforms. Hashtags about the topic on Weibo alone have been viewed nearly 5 billion times. And other videos have quickly surfaced. According to police, this one shows a brawl in Huizhou after a woman there was beaten.
In a way, the rise of women's rights consciousness in China is quite rapid, faster than a lot of other countries. So I think that kind of the feeling of threat from men is especially acute.
But feminism is a divisive topic here. State media coverage has downplayed gender as the cause, instead linking the Tangshan attack to organized crime. Government censors pulled down the video, and Weibo yanked more than 900 accounts for violations, including gender confrontation. Police made 9 arrests and rolled out what was billed as a thunderstorm campaign to assure residents it was safe to eat out again. Tangshan was even dropped from China's honorary list of, quote, civilized cities. Yet in all the fallout and discussion, what's missing is the women. Nearly 2 weeks after the attack, they haven't been seen or heard from, and no relatives have spoken out, stirring concerns and more questions here around what's being called an epidemic of violence against women.
Authorities here just released a report that reveals the condition of 2 of the women was far more serious than first acknowledged, that they spent time in intensive care, even after police described their injuries as minor. Officials did not respond to our request for more details about the women, their families, or their ensuing silence about an attack that has so many others talking.
So I had missed that one last part about the police saying that the women suffered minor injuries rather than being in intensive care. I guess that's maybe why they're being investigated. But yeah, so guys, that's what we're discussing. So yeah, brutal attack against this woman. And that second attack, I haven't seen like the raw footage from that second attack, but like you see the one guy, like he appears to be bleeding. Did you see that in the footage? Right? That one guy appears to be like heavily bleeding from his forehead during whatever kind of violence was there. That was really messed up. But then again, fuck, I don't even know what side he was on. The shit was crazy. But yeah, so collective punishment, and this case, it's a lot of Communist Party officials being fired because of this, the police being investigated, and the city being removed from the national civilized list of cities, right? And that's some sort of honor. It's not clear to me what else you get other than an honor, but like it's an honor to be on this list, and you're put there for meeting various criteria. And this city had been there actually multiple times, and so they just got stripped of that. So yeah, again, to the people who just came through, like, does any of this make sense? Does it make sense to does it make sense to have any sort of collective collective action? A debate board leftists should say collective pay for bad behavior. Collective pay for bad behavior. Thanks for being here, debate board. Haven't seen you in a while, so hope you're doing well. Punish the city for the action of a couple of people. Yeah, so all you can do is punish those who took part in different people who are not responsible. Hey, Olifax, if the city has repeated issues, then yes. Yeah, so again, the point of the national civilized civilized city list is to show which cities have like good social order, and what the CCP considers good social order might be different from what we might consider good social order. So keep that in mind. Might there be some use for us as a people to be thinking about these things in a collective manner rather than individually? Which I was saying before to the audience. So this is just for the new people. But yeah, it's it's not a good social credit score. No, it's not that. That's something different. Good social credit scores for individuals. This is a city-based thing, and so we looked up the city, and it's a city of 7.7 million. So it's an extremely large city. The city is huge by American standards. It's a massive city. And they all suffered that by, losing that status, which I'm not sure if that confers anything else, but, So anyway, yeah. So we could talk about this if you like. So, exclamation open in chat. Population, 7.7 million. Brento Vox, thanks for being here. Exclamation open in chat. Lets you know that this is an open walk-on panel. Or as members like you, staying at home may participate. Go into the server and go into the robot waiting room so you can let in this link for your country. It's love to have you. So yeah, if you guys want to come in and chat about it, yeah, that'd be great. Let's see. We have got 2 people. I'm gonna pull them in and. Hello? Hi.
Hey.
Well, hi.
Give me a second. Let me mute the thing.
Okay. Let's put these up. Yeah, so what are your thanks for being here, everyone. What are your thoughts on this idea of collective punishment?
So, if we want to talk about the specific situation, right? If we want to talk about when it comes to China and what they did to this city, I think that that's entirely within the culture there. I think that removing its honorary status, right? As I understand it, and I could be mistaken on this, it doesn't come with many benefits for the people, though it does give benefits to the officials who run the city, right? Like,
have you checked that out?
Light.
Have you looked it up? The national cities list?
I just browsed it.
Okay.
Like, don't take it as word as gospel, please. This is.
I'll look it up myself. But go ahead.
Yeah. I could very well be wrong, so just grain of salt, Ken.
That's fine.
But that being the case, and that being the case that China is a much more collective culture than here in America, I think if that's the case, it's eminently reasonable to levy that kind of thing because it doesn't affect the people so much as it affects the officials, and it shows that they failed at their job, and it's a punishment directed towards them. And I think that's fair. But if we want to talk about the conversation of collective punishment in general, right? Yeah, I'm not really for it. I don't know, that's just my thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you go next. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I was also I just tried to quickly find some information about that program, and pretty much the same thing that I read was along the lines of like, there's no like actual difference on the people. It's more of just like, hey, this is a really nice place to live, guys. This is our stamp of approval. If you want to go here, it's like really cool. And from that perspective, I don't really have an issue with a city that may or may not have like done something that would have been extremely bad by their standards, to an extent where if just a crime happened and say those people were punished properly and the people were taken care of properly, that's one thing. And then that would be like, okay, well, it looks like everything was taken care of normally and therefore they're still good. But this sounds like it happened. There was attempted like people involved that were like trying to cover it up, maybe even some officials that were involved and be like, okay, like this might be gang related. We don't want to like ruffle any feathers. And when it comes from that perspective, it's like, okay, well, this seems to be a much bigger problem from the city, in which case maybe there's a, like, we need to like focus on, this is like a city thing. This is like a more than just the individuals involved. This involves the entire like city involved, which could lead to a collective punishment.
Yeah. So, okay, coming from an individualized culture, right, where we look at each other through a lens of like, my business is mine and your business is yours, mostly, right? But where we go through that, I think it leaves us lonely and detached, right? I think that if we are going through life and not and aren't concerned about like the status of our neighbors, like imagine like the feeling of living in a city, right? Just like an American city where people don't check up on you, right? This is a common complaint, right? Like unlike in a small town, right? People don't really like check up on you. They don't know your name. They don't interact with you. oftentimes they don't want you to interact with them if you try to reach out. It's very isolating. And the idea of acting in a collective manner and caring about what happens, right? Even if it's for selfish reasons, right? Like in that, it will look bad upon my my neighborhood, my locality, my city, if negative things happen here, right? If people are going through hardships, or at the very least people are behaving badly, and so I'm going to keep track of these things, right? I'm going to intervene. That doesn't sound altogether terrible, right? And it seems like a way to spur that would be some sort of one, collective incentive, and then two, collective punishment. And so what do you think of what I said now, just then, and then we'll continue on?
Sure. So the problem I think with that way of thinking is the idea that we recognize that certain groups just don't have power to affect change, or have much less power to affect change than others. They're much less part of the collective, and they're treated as such, right? And when we levy any type of collective punishment, it'll naturally hit those people worse, right? And it will be manifestly unjust because, again, these people have had much less power to affect change and things like that. And so I think that when it comes to, like, just in general, like just when it comes to actual punishments, not just an honorary city losing or something like that, but an actual kind of removal of material funds or something like that, it's really hard to justify doing that to an entire group when not all the group members were responsible. It's essentializing, and that's usually a bad thing.
What Prime said though with the collective incentive is, do you think there's a way to implement an incentive where if it's not given, it is seen as a punishment? Because that's where I was trying to think of a way where let's try and give a reason to have this collective feeling like, okay, we want all of us to be good, we want all of us to do great things, and if one of us messes up, we should try and like either shame that or try and like stifle that. But how can we have that community without it being like, okay, if we don't do this, we're going to face a punishment, where it's only the incentive is what we're trying to aim for?
I think it's hard for it, even if it's simply, if you don't meet this criteria, right? Like it's hard to talk about in hypothetical terms, but let's just try. If you don't meet a certain standard, you don't receive X reward. That gets seen as a punishment if you don't get it, right? Because especially if it's a standard that most people meet, or it's met on a regular basis, right? It becomes expected rather than something that they have to strive for or work towards. So the only way I think to do that would to be make it so that it is hard to get, it is difficult to get, and therefore it is very rare that people get it, because as soon as it becomes common, it's expected.
Yeah. So, is people sleeping around you? Is that why you're whispering?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Am I not loud enough? I can speak closer.
I can hear you. I just wanted to just be sure.
Yeah,
okay. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. But anyway, so all right, I'm gonna go hard for this this idea of both collectivized incentives and collectivized punishment. Well, my actual thoughts on this are actually it's really a moving target, because I'm just working through this in my own head. But I'm gonna go hard for it. All right. So, like, we live in a society. There you go. I said it. But we live in communities that, like I said, are communities in the loosest sense, right? Communities in the sense that we are sharing a space, right? A region, a locality. We're sharing that, but we don't interact with each other. And when there is bad behavior, and I mean like crime within the community, we don't take any sense of ownership in what's happening. We walk away when we see crime. We'll walk away from it, right? Now, I'm not talking about like crime involving like weapons, right? Like guns. Like no one's asking like grandma down the street who's looking through a window to be fucking Rambo. This is like armed men or some shit like that, right? Like that's obviously ridiculous. But still, when there's bad behavior, people don't have a sense of like this is a thing that affects me. Like I'm not the one who's being victimized here, right? So that's someone else's issue. And has nothing to do with me. And would I think I could easily make the case, I think, that it would be better if we at the very least had a sense of shame, had like a huge sense of shame when these things happen to us, that like to our neighborhood, right? Like to see that crime is ticking up here, right? And this shames me. Like, how could this happen to my community? I've never been victimized. No one I know has been victimized, but this happening to my community. This thing happened here, and I feel a deep sense of shame about this. And maybe that'll spur me to do something, right? To start intervening in these issues and hopefully keep them from happening in the first place. Like, I don't see, looking at it, especially in that narrow sense of shame, how that could be a bad thing.
You don't see how encouraging or trying to incentivize groups or individuals within a group to feel shame for a behavior of whatever group that they've been lumped into, right? Like, it's look, shame has its uses, right? We've argued about this before. But in general, you have to be very careful with the application of shame because it has some bad consequences. And especially, again, if you are facing any kind of actual severe punishment, right? It really gets into tyrannical territory really quick. Can you just imagine specifically opposing being someone who actually is going out and doing things to stop the violence, right? To stop the gender-based violence in China and things like that, or whatever group or community you're in. You're actively working against the people, you're the majority of your group, and yet still you receive the same punishment that the rest of the group does who aren't working on it. It's manifestly unfair.
Again, hold on, but what is this punishment? So far, we haven't stated a punishment. There could be a punishment involved, but like we haven't stated what it is. If it's like group incarceration, well, then that's something else, right? And again, this is a city of 7.7 million. Like, you're not locking up. No one's locking up that many people for whatever, for anything, right?
To be fair,
but
China has
they're
locked down
trying
entire
to.
cities before.
Well, obviously that's okay, sure. But it's like basically they're doing what I'm talking about, right? Like instilling a sense of shame. You were on this list. And you got bid on this multiple times. So the city has like received that honor, and shown that it can meet this standard, this high threshold, the standard. And now it's been stripped of that, right? And so now there's like a point of reflection for the city, right? For a lot of people. Now, there are 7.7 million people. Well, I'm not going to give a shit, like whatever. Like, even within a collectivized society, a lot of people are just not going to really give a shit about this. But still, like, it sparks a conversation, and it sparks like, well, what could have been done here? In an incident that they might have otherwise not considered any which way, right? Like, you have public violence, right? These guys acting out, beating on these women in a brutal fashion, right? And people don't step in. If assuming that you can be a part of this conversation before the government shuts it down, the idea of gender-based violence rather than gang-based violence, but gender-based violence, like so far you could think of the outrage that sparked, right? There's outrage that was sparked online by this incident of violence,
but you hit that nail on the head right there. You acknowledged it there before the government shuts it down. You talk about sparking a conversation. 5 billion people saw the hashtag on the I forget Weibo chat or Weibo or I forget
Weibo, yeah, Weibo, I believe it's
Weibo.
called.
Apologies.
Not
Weibo chat,
Weibo.
Weibo chat, yeah, Weibo chat. But the government shut it down. It shut down any conversation about this. So any kind of value in this
But that's
business
a
expansion
different thing. That's a
sparking
different thing.
conversation would have. Oh, fair enough.
Focus on like like that's a Chinese government thing in terms of censorship, right? Like that's a CCP thing. Focus on like the actual issue at hand, which is the collective punishment, you know? Like that's the thing I'm talking about importing, right? Not like the censorship.
Well, I just two quick things. So it sounds like Prime, at least the position you're currently taking, is that the idea of taking away this honor was a reasonable thing in this state, right? That's what you're kind of arguing right now. You would believe that them taking away that honor role of being a civilized city, that's a reasonable thing to take away in this case.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I as of now, I'm also timidly would see as like, yeah, this seems pretty good. I don't know, where would you draw the line if having this honorary role has knock-on effects to the sense of like, say there are a bunch of businesses that have nothing to do with the city that go out because maybe tourism is really low because the people don't want to move in here, people don't want to travel here anymore because, oh, this place is not a safe place to be, I'm not going to come here. And it has all these other knock-on effects to like other people that had nothing to do with this. Do you think would you still be okay with that at that point?
Not for knock-on effects. Well, I think if it's something that if it's purely honorary, well then yes, it'll have. If it's a purely honorary title, then I think the effects of instilling a sense of public action and public responsibility will be very little. So if it's something that actually has effects and that hurts people who otherwise did nothing, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the point. The point is that yeah, I actually have a stake in this. I have a stake in my community. I have a stake in what happens around me, and so like I should be invested in what happens. And if I'm not, then yeah, I could be hurt. Like the fact that no one feels that here in the States, that no one feels that anything can ever happen to them, and that like the troubles of others like are not their issues, that has nothing to do with them. That's a problem. I think separate from this entire discussion, I honestly think that's a problem. I think that's a problem of us. I think it's a problem myself. I mean, it's not like I'm special in this way as well, right? I think it makes our society worse. So I'm thinking, how can we fix that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sure. I would definitely agree that I definitely feel like the sense of community is definitely failing us in some aspects, and it would be great if we all had better buy-in to all, like as everyone, like what's the word? All rising tides lifts all boats or whatever. I think if we all had a buy-in to that, it would be much better. And I have one more thing I want to add, with Wick, if you want to add something to that. Oh, okay.
You can add something, but I do have something to say, but finish your statement.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to also go on to was when I first thought about this from a punishment standpoint, I was trying to view of what could we institute that would be quote unquote a punishment that would actually help this thing. Not where we're taking resources away or taking a title away from a city, but what can we implement as someone might see as a punishment that would actually help solve this problem. And just off the top of my head, I don't know if this would actually work in any case, having like a mandatory session for some people or the whole population. Maybe we give it out to businesses. They'd be like, hey, here's like a seminar that we're going to spend work hours on to like go over some violence that's going on in our country, stuff like that. I don't know how necessarily good that would do, but that's just something that comes to mind. And that's like a punishment that I could see that would possibly be valuable in these scenarios.
It's a very off the top of your head take, so I won't push against it too hard, my friend, but it just seems like that whole kind of corporate like computer-based training that people have to go through, like, oh, don't sexually assault anyone or don't rape anyone, like thanks training.
Well, I
think
would say there's maybe some value in there.
I understand, but I want to address your question and the comment. Like, I think that yes, the atomization of society, this only deal with what affects me, don't care about what affects anyone else. Yes, it is a problem. But collective punishment, I think, is not the solution. It's just going to create worse knockoff effects. Like, yes, we need to solve this somehow, but I think using force to do so and coercion to do so is not the way forward. I think that it's going to lead to worse ends. You cannot, at the end of the day, coerce someone into caring about other people, right? You can incentivize it, sure. You can try to lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But if you insist on punishing everyone if they don't, again, I just do not see a way that doesn't lead to very tyrannical institutions. Now, when we talk about the specific instance in China, this removing of an honorary title, that's fine, because again, this isn't, I wouldn't consider this a punishment that affects the people based on what I know right now. That may change if I find like they lose funding to certain resources that they would get. I might change my mind, but as I'm looking, I don't see that. So I'm fine with this specific instance, but anything more than just an honorary title type punishment, I'm not okay with.
Yeah. So I was thinking of what could be a punishment as well, and I thought maybe or maybe a benefit. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But tax break, right? Like there's a special tax break that people get for having a city that demonstrates some sort of good behavior. And when your city falls out of it for whatever reason, like you lose this tax break. Otherwise, I'm not sure where we should be on the incentive side or the punishment side. Incentive side, being that there's a high bar to get this thing, and then you have to clear that bar to get the incentive, or punishment, and that like it's a thing that everyone can get. Basically what we was trying to say before, and then because you fell below some sort of threshold, then you lose that that tax break.
So my question for you on that, Prime, is what's to prevent the people who can afford to move out of such cities to the cities with the tax breaks from simply doing that? And then in that case, this incentive just hits the people who are too poor to even move, right?
And just kind of snowballs at that point.
Okay.
Right?
All right. What a Republican talking point. Like, it's like, what? Sorry, like I didn't know in your old age you're getting even more conservative. All right.
Well, what are you talking? This is a very leftist talking point.
This is not a leftist talking point. I can assure you.
Just move thing, like the just move take. What? That's literally the take. When we say just move, that's a sarcastic response to Republicans saying like, oh hey, just get another job, right? You don't like the laws here? Well then get another job. Or that like when they say when you try to institute taxes on the rich, right? Oh well, they're gonna flee the country. They're not gonna fucking flee the country. Or they'll flee the city. They'll flee the locality. So you can't ever do anything, obviously, or because the rich will get quite scared to run away. So that means do absolutely nothing. So yeah, there's a leftist critique against what you're saying. Well, I'm saying that no. Let me explain this. Let me explain this. Okay. So one of the things that's a problem with this is, again, the poor can't move. This is why it's silly when people say just move, because a lot of people can't. A lot of people cannot do that.
Exactly.
They are not in a situation where they can get out of it. And so if you can just move, you're pretty privileged, right? You're privileged enough to have the resources to get out of that situation. But like you were saying, it doesn't help the people who are still stuck in that situation, right? It just doesn't help them. Now we're talking about tax breaks for corporations. I'm assuming you're
I'm saying
talking
tax
about
breaks for everybody.
for individuals, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's just I don't see it being an effective tool. But that's
no. Nothing you talked about showed that would be ineffective, right? You said that some people would move. All right, or whatever, right? So that's not how like populations actually work, right? Populations don't just up and move for reasons like this. I mean, if they're bomb dropping, then people move. but populations don't move like large amounts for tax breaks, right? If that was the case, right, then you would see like blue states emptied out, because blue states may tax you more, right? But there are plenty of people in blue states. There are plenty of people who are of wealth who are in blue states because they have reasons to be there, right? There are opportunities there. People come for opportunities, not necessarily just for a fucking tax break. But in any case, right? But that's not. It doesn't matter. So let's say like your prediction comes true, and people of wealth move out. Okay, well, whatever, right? That doesn't matter for the thing that I'm trying to address, and which is creating a sense of collective responsibility within that neighborhood, right, or within that area. So yeah, it doesn't actually matter, like, for the thing that we're actually trying to do here.
Sure. I think the main issue comes back to what kind of Wick was saying at the beginning, where it's like, if you make it too much, like, let's say that it's a huge tax break benefit. If I take that away from a group of people that maybe they were getting it for a long time, that taking away is going to much more negatively affect the poorer communities. And then I think we agree, if we remove, like, we make people less financially unstable, it's probably not going to lead to better benefits. We're probably not going to see them, like, most likely, I don't think we're going to see them get back together.
Okay, so if this is incentive rather than an incentive, then if that's what you're concerned about.
Yeah, reaching that, putting the bar in the exactly correct place or closer to the right place could be, I think, a little hard to handle, like hard to like figure out where that point is. I think there probably is a point. I just think it'd be hard to find that.
You were going to say something, Wick?
No, he hit it. Right?
Yeah, I'm still. So the reason why I chose tax breaks because it's not necessarily like, I think this is literally the lightest thing that you can impose upon a population, that taking away a tax break. Now, like, will this destabilize the economic conditions of people, especially if it's a small tax break, right? Like, I haven't even stated how large this thing will be, right? Like, is it something that will make or break a person's finances, or is this just an incentive, right? Just like, hey, well, my tax bill is slightly lower than it otherwise would have been, right? And I can notice in my tax bill, this is a thing, like, as I'm paying my taxes, this is a deduction that I get to have automatically applied because I just happen to live in this city that's doing well. Oh, hey, the next year I don't have that deduction. Isn't that weird? Hey, why is that the case? Oh, it's because of our city failing to meet these standards. It's something to consider, right? So no one is saying that this would be something that would ruin a person's finances even to begin with, right? There are plenty of like deductions that you have, that we all have, like when we're doing our taxes, that like we're grateful for, but like it doesn't, like one way or the other, you still got to pay thousands of dollars or the fuck, right? So still, but it's a punishment nonetheless. So again, I feel like you guys are like, this is like something so simple. You guys are like literally scaremongering against this thing. It's like a very simple thing. We provide an incentive or a punishment, whatever way you want to look at it, maybe the same thing, right? An incentive to care about what's happening. Before we continue on, Universal Discourse is here. Hey, Universal, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine. How are
I have my stream up. Do you want me to cut the stream?
No, it's fine.
Okay. I'm shouting you out to my community, which don't know you yet. Mm-hmm. And I listen to catch up on where you're at. But I was very interested in this because it has to do with some new research findings, and we've been talking about this all day.
Okay. Well, interesting. Yeah, so what we're talking about, specifically what sparked this conversation was this vicious attack that happened in China, and it's not just a town, right? It's not just a city. I'm looking up this place, and it's like it's an area. It's almost like it's like a province. Yeah, it's like a province. So 7.7 million people. But anyway, it's a vicious attack that happened within a restaurant. These men, a man approached a woman. A woman rejected him, and then he started smacking her, and beating her up. Her and her friends intervene. Then they get beat up, and he ends up dragging this woman out to in the public onto the street by her hair, and then beating her up. And civilians just stand by and watch as this happened. And it was like a group thing. So it's like a group of men who attacked these women. And it sparked outrage within that community, and it's a pretty terrible attack. And we were watching video of it, but the city lost, or the province. I'm not exactly sure which one, but they lost an honorary title for the national civilized city title. It's a list of cities that meet certain criteria in China, and they lost that title, and that's given by the government, and it was stripped away from them. And then party officials are fired, police are being investigated for the response, all that stuff. So it sparked this conversation about collective punishment.
Wow. Yeah. And who should pay for bad behavior?
Yeah.
Okay. And so since I came in late to the game, and I don't know what the consensus is here, or what the leaning is.
Where is there ever consensus?
You know what I mean. I don't know where it's going so far. Do people feel that, the entire territory needs to be punished by having been stripped of its honors? And what about what was done to the man that was committing all the violence and the other people that were committing it? And what did they deserve? And who has the right to determine who should pay? Right? I was interested in it because there's some recent research coming out from the Gen Sixers, and it basically says it's backwards, but it's people hurt other people to signal their goodness, their own goodness. Yeah. So that when I saw this stream label, I thought, okay, well, who's the bad guy here then? Because the people were acting because they believed that was the right thing to do.
Oh,
and then who really does have the right to punish, or didn't act because they didn't help? But the man beating the woman, he clearly thought he was in the right. He has his own concept of honor, especially if he's Asian. The government has its obligation to act. So all of a sudden, things like good and bad, it goes out the door.
Does it? I disagree.
How do you come to an agreement of what is bad behavior and what is good behavior, and who has the right to punish? Well, if what you think is good is so very, very different from what the majority of people are.
Well, in this particular case, when we're talking about what China did, and that's not necessarily what I'm talking about importing exactly what China is doing, right? I'm talking about the idea of collecting punishment and importing that into our Western society. So keep that in mind. Right. But specifically what they're talking about here, for this national city thing, right? I got a little information about this. It's National Supply City. It's an assessment that's carried out by some sort of group. And they watch presentations, review materials, investigate the city online, to do field trips, and some sort of overall consideration. A total score of 100 will be given across 9 indicators, namely political, legislative, market, cultural, living, human, social, and ecological environments. Another 20 points will be graded based on 4 indicators related to the area's characteristics and cityscapes, like the actual geography and do you got parks? Do you have is it a walkable city type of things like that, right? But yeah, part of it is living situations, right? And social situations. And we can create metrics. The point is we can create group metrics and judge it by that, right? Not necessarily each individual interaction that's happened within a city of millions, right? Judging those and collectively figuring out, well, this is a good city, right? It could be the amount of crime that happens within that city. It could be like, are children going to school, right? Like, is there a high delinquency rate? Is there? We can come up with a whole list of these things, right? But you can make that, like, it doesn't have to necessarily be like these are good people, right? And like somehow trying to judge that over a population of millions. But like, are they meeting these standards? Is the city worse off compared to others or better off? And then giving them some sort of incentive or punishment based on that.
Yeah. So you've got arbitrary criteria determining what is good behavior, and then there's this obligation to punish, make someone pay, or penalize them for what is now then bad behavior.
I think that just to kind of bring this back, right? To kind of like hone in, I think, on what is a key issue here. It's the concept of what is just. Is it just if you receive a punishment for something you did not do or you had no realistic power to affect change over? You can affect a little bit of change, right? Like I would never acknowledge or I would never deny that the individuals can't change the world around them. I think we can. But when we're talking on the law of big numbers here, when we're talking on a scale of millions in a city, for example, right? This idea that you would be responsible to meet a metric that millions have to, and if you don't, you're punished. I think it's very unjust. I just think it's very unjust to punish someone like that.
So should the government really have penalized this province, this area, for the behavior of one individual?
Hypothetical. In the actual real world, right? In the actual event, I think all they did was remove an honorary title, which does mean something, right? But it's not the same as removing resources or anything like that. So I'm okay with this specific example. But when you try to bring it to a more kind of conceptual level, I think it breaks down in any sort of meaningful punishment. So
I think I kind of tend to agree with that. I came in late, so go ahead. I'm going to listen a little bit, but I'm
so
fascinated with this.
Sorry, Ori, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I want to try one more thing, maybe, because I know you didn't like my first ask for like a punishment kind of a thing. But
it's okay. I like you in general.
Oh, thanks. What if, and this is something that I've heard other people say, and I don't know if it would count here. I don't know how you guys feel about this. What if for certain locations, if you didn't meet a certain threshold, then people were required to do some level of community service in their community? It's like, okay, well, now you have to do a certain number of hours going to a soup kitchen, cleaning up your highways, stuff like that. What would you say to that as a punishment?
Again, it's if there's any, like, what happens if you refuse?
What level of refusal?
Like,
Let's say that we do have,
okay, you didn't meet the standard. You didn't meet the standard, so you all have to work in the soup kitchen for a week. And you say, I just don't think I will. What happens to you?
So if I was pressed on that level, I'm going to lean more towards some form of monetary loss that you are going to have. I don't think that people should be incarcerated for that kind of stuff. But at some level, there will have to be some push that keeps getting like more forceful. I agree that would happen. But I think if we give people the opportunities, like say this is when you do these hours, these are work hours, you will be paid for this as if you were at your job, kind of like when, or maybe not necessarily for your job, but like say when you go to jury duty, kind of something like that. If it was along those lines, I think if we make it that level, not only are we getting benefit of people, one, doing community service, and that's, I believe, going to lead to a more stronger knit community overall. You're also giving them the opportunity where they're not losing too much out of that. So like they're not losing wages or anything.
So I will say this. I think that the idea of things like jury duty or a mandatory social participation aren't bad. I like those things. Like taxes are good. Like jury duty, that's a good civil duty that we have. The issue becomes when we set it to something that you like a standard that you can either earn or get out of or something like that. When it becomes kind of like a thing where you have to like a punishment, like you said, if you don't meet a certain threshold, you have to do this. Then it gets into the level of, again, everyone's going to see that instead of seeing it as their civic duty, they're going to see it as a punishment. And that's going to change how people deal with it and relate to it. And it's going to, I think, any kind of good that would come from it. No. So if we want a mandatory civil service, right, to some degree, which I think we all do, I won't put words in mouths, right? But I think most of us think jury duty is a good thing, right? Like most of us think some form of taxation is a good thing and a necessary thing. The problem is we don't turn it into a contest, right? We make it mandatory across the board rather than some people have to, some people don't. Because as soon as some people have to and some people don't, it's going to be messy.
So are you saying that if we did it that way, even though, so you would say some people don't do it, some people do have to do it because of like certain standards that certain places aren't meeting. Do you think that we wouldn't see a benefit in those places that are slightly below the standard for whatever reasons, forcing them to do this community service? You don't think we'd see any benefit? Like it would just lead to more negatives?
Really, like it's really hard for me to guess on this,
Okay.
right? Like I don't
Yeah.
know. And then the question would become, even if we do see benefit, would it outweigh the, I think, the coercive nature of it, right? Like we recognize that certain civic duties, like jury duty and taxes, and I hate to go back to those two examples, but they're the ones I can think of. It's late at night. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sleepy. But we recognize that while they are coercive, there's a necessity for them, and we're willing that the good outweighs the coercive nature, right? And in something like this, again, I don't know. I like to answer your question. I don't know. I'd have to see specifics. I don't. So
Yeah, so just to move this along. One, I agree with Wick, which pains me. But on your specific example, I think that how would you implement that? The only way to implement that would involve like police action. And that, you know, people are going to say that I don't want to do this fucking do this community service, and then are we gonna jail them? Like, that would be just ridiculous.
Well, at the end of the day, I can just fall back on what you said. I'll just remove a tax benefit that they could have had. I can just always fall back. Like, I just have one level before your level. It's like, instead you can choose to do community service, and you don't have to get that. You get to keep the tax benefit that you would have lost.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so rather than lose the benefit, then do community service, right? So like, so then it doesn't become group. Okay. How do I feel about that?
It's pretty much you get to choose. You choose your punishment. Do community service or lose your tax benefit.
No, I'm not so sure. Oh, sorry. Were you gonna say something, Wick? Okay, sorry.
No, I'm just here. I do have to go in a little bit, but I have enjoyed this conversation. It's just I'm tired.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's late.
I also have to leave soon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so that's fine. Guys, this is open panel if you guys want to join in. This might be a short stream. But yeah, but you know, link is in chat. Anyway, Trey, yeah, I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I think that might be an interesting idea that like all right, so your city has failed, your locality has failed to meet these standards, right? And rather than lose feeling that punishment, here's something you could do to actually remediate that, right? So actually doing things to make the community better. So there could be projects, right? Looking at China's cities, civilized city list, right? They're judged on all kinds of standards, but you know, part of them is just like, you know, like I imagine would be the beautification of the city. If a city's got like a lot of trash there, right? Then it, you know, it has a collective effect on people's psyche when they see a place that's, you know, messed up like that. So let's help clean up our city. Let's maybe do some projects and maybe help build something, help build a park, like build playgrounds or some crap like that. Things to make the city better overall. And you get to keep your tax break. If your tax break isn't that big of a deal to you, right? And again, this shouldn't be something that would break a person's wallet in the first place. But if it's not that big of a deal to you, then you don't have to. Don't worry about it. So I actually I like it a lot better then. I like it a lot better. I'm not entirely sure I would implement it yet. I have to put more thought on it, but I like it a lot better.
Well, the only other thing I want to add to that is, yes, you're not only helping your remedy a problem in your city, but you're also going towards the goal that we're trying to get. I think by having people doing those projects together, you are forming more of a community. You're interacting with other people in your community you maybe never would have faced because you don't. Yeah,
Look,
that's
there
what
are
I do.
benefits to
If
this,
they have
right?
incentives and benefits, then are they actually being punished?
Well, I guess that comes down to a
The
view,
the
kind of
key
like what. Oh, sorry.
tying it to standards that if you don't meet, that you have to participate in, or there will be a penalty, like whether it's minor or not. Like, look, if you want to put it into a program where a city beneficial program where people can opt in and there is no punishment for opting out, all for it, right? But again, when you add that coercive nature to it, it's a poison pill, right? It creates problems.
But we have coercive things in our society all the time.
I'm agreeing to that, and so then we gotta look. Do the benefits outweigh the cost? And I would have to see specifics to have any idea, right?
I don't know. It's just like I feel like you are just like I feel like this first of all, the idea that this would lead to tyranny, right? Like that's again another conservative talking point about taxes. Like taxes is a form of tyranny, right? You're putting coercive power in the hands of the government, and like the moment you do that, you're seconds away from troops goose stepping down your fucking city streets, right?
This is a spectrum. Everything is a spectrum. There are levels where I'm okay with,
true.
and there are levels that you are not okay with. I guarantee you.
Yeah, but like this is like ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous, right? Especially what we're talking about. And this is how you start off the conversation. And is that like, oh man, this is going to lead to tyranny, right? This collective punishment. Like we have, we put coercive power within the state all the time, to make society work better. We let the government make decisions on our behalf, and we let the government take action that might hurt a group of individuals, but we understand that because society will be better off in the long run, that we'll allow it. Even people who we hurt and they haven't done anything wrong, right? We make these calculations all the time. So
sometimes I agree with it, and sometimes I don't.
Okay, all right, okay. So then, but then what you're doing is like you're pushing us like, oh well, I don't know enough about it. And
I am
this is
pushing back against it to create discussion.
You keep saying that like within the context of the very light punishment of losing a fucking tax break, right? You said tyrannical. It could lead to tyranny. That's what you said. I'm sorry, I hit my mic. That you said that this could lead to fucking tyranny because they lost a tax break. I'm sorry, like Wick, within our hypothetical, that's a fucking ridiculous statement. That's a ridiculous statement. Like you get that, right? Like that's a ridiculous slippery slope. And so like, it makes it hard to engage with you then.
I'm tired, so I don't remember correctly, but I don't think.
Well, I'm not tired, so I do remember correctly.
Yeah. I think I used that before we talked about the specific punishment, because again, I stand by my statement that if you give too much coercive power to the government, it can be tyrannical. I think that's something neither of you would disagree with.
Yeah,
right?
Because you're slippery. This is a slippery slope argument. Yes, indeed, right? Mm-hmm. If we let the government execute people just because they dislike them, then yeah, that would lead a tyrannical government. We just put that in the power of officials. Hey, if you insult this official, you get your head chopped off. That might lead to tyranny. Yeah, I can agree with you there, Wick. We're not fucking talking about it. Why bring it up? Thanks.
Because these things have a Like the slope is only it's only a fallacy if the slope ain't slippery, right? And there's certain cases where we've seen it. We've seen it lead to worse and worse to the government taking more and more power. As like censorship, I know I harp on this a lot,
I'm
but
gonna smoke
censorship
now.
leads to more censorship. It doesn't get less censorious. It almost always gets more,
We're not talking about
right?
censorship though.
I understand, but I'm just using that to
I know.
illustrate the example that some slopes are slippery, and I think that when we
Yeah,
talk about
we understand that.
punishing
But
collectively, that can become a slippery thing.
you know,
Because
but
what if
oh my
tax
God,
breaks don't work?
wait.
What if they don't work? What if I can easily imagine a situation that that it's not effective, it doesn't work, and so they're like, well, maybe we should try something a little harsher. And there it goes, right? Like this is an easily imaginable scenario.
Yes,
And we're dealing with
the
hypotheticals.
hey guys, the tax breaks didn't work, right? Maybe we should try something harsher. Public whippings, right? Public whippings. That's the next step. Like what? Wick, please engage with the hypothetical as it is, rather than like here's what it could be, right? Like tax breaks, like equal gulags. It could be. It's a possibility, right? Yes, Wick, it's a possibility. It's a possibility, but so remote that we don't actually have to deal with it within the context of this conversation. Correct?
Sure, but
Correct. Okay,
again, you
great.
don't
As
have to
long as
go
we, as
that
long as
far
we
down the
agree,
slope.
taxes don't
You
equal
don't have to go
gulags. Great.
that far down the slope because even you wouldn't be okay if it was forced.
Oh my God, Wick, you're driving me crazy.
Yo, I know, but he just gave a hypothetical earlier that you weren't okay with the forced food shelter.
You mean the
The community
Food
service.
community
shelter.
service?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Forced community service, and that isn't gulag by any stretch of the imagination, right? But it's still harsher and something that I would consider kind of tyrannical, right? Like maybe we should use a different word than tyrannical because tyrannical covers so much, and it is admittedly too broad. But it is more. I am uncomfortable with the government having the ability to force us to do community service in that manner.
What is preferable to community service and restoring tax breaks? What in your opinion, in this case, in this hypothetical, is preferable to what was been done?
If we're talking about this hypothetical, I'm against collective punishment in this hypothetical. Like I'm just
Okay,
against the
I get it.
concept, right? Like,
I get it.
and
Okay,
we're using hypotheticals to explore the concept, and this is
sure.
why I think it's. Yeah, but I can point to a real world example just now that I'm
Okay.
okay with, and that's the what happened to the Chinese city. Again, as I understand it, it's just an honorary title that doesn't remove resources from the community. And in that case, that is something that I'm okay with. It's not hypothetical, it actually happened. I don't think that's tyrannical. I don't think that's out of line. I think that's okay.
Okay. What about the value of honor in the Asian culture and what it means to lose status in the face of the Chinese government and how devastating that is going to be for each individual? The humiliation. And then, yes, the attrition of anything, produce, trade deals. Everybody's going to want to follow the leader who's in good compliance and are being good children to the government, right? They're not going to want to go with these bad kids. Are you sure you understand the implications of exactly what happens when China removes your honor?
I can't understand it in the same way someone who lives there would,
Okay.
right? Like I
Okay.
acknowledge that. But again, just trying my best. Yeah.
Okay. Just had to put that on the table.
Yeah.
So you would see that as a punishment, though. Like other people are going to be affected by that. That you would say shouldn't
Yes,
get
but
that quote unquote punishment.
those aren't as those are more ephemeral, right? Than the actual material taking away of resources.
Well, in China,
It's
you don't have to
status, and I
take the
understand.
resources. You
I
just have to.
understand status is important in that culture, and
Mhm.
it is a form of wealth in that culture in a very real sense. But again, I think it is more so towards the officials who run the city, who I think have more power over to affect the city than the average individual within that system does.
It's just okay. Yeah.
I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Oh,
Sorry, gang.
it's like,
Yeah.
first of all, you
Always
should fucking
disgusted at me.
apologize. You should
Always
fucking
disgusted
apologize
Aw.
to me. Like,
Aw.
god damn it.
Aw.
Like, it's like,
Just when you thought you liked Wick. Just when you thought you agreed with him.
yeah. Yeah.
Wait, can I ask?
No.
Can I ask you one more question, Rick?
Go ahead.
Of course.
Yeah, before you go, can you ever see a city or a town or some form of community where not everyone is involved, but there is a problem that is systemic in the community where the whole as a whole the community must be punished? Can you think of a scenario like that?
I mean, yes, I can. But I can't think
Would you
of
agree in a
of
community punishment in that case?
Right.
like if like there's matters of scale. If you are in a police precinct, for example, right, and there's what 100 employees. I'm just making numbers up here, right? And it's rife with corruption. It's rife with abuse. I think that firing everyone and then having them re-enter the rehiring process, perfectly okay.
And that's
Okay.
okay. What if it?
Oh, you go
okay,
first.
sorry.
No, you go
It
first.
is a
gonna
form
ask
of punishment, right? It is a
Yeah,
form of
it
punishment
is.
because they still have to go through the hiring process, even if they've done nothing wrong, even if they're one of the good ones, quote unquote. But in that case, again, since they had the scale was small,
Mhm.
it's a targeted punishment. I think I'm okay with that.
And so there, I guess what you said levels of scale. How
Mhm.
much of that?
When we
How
talk
much?
about cities, right?
Okay.
Then I'm not
Okay.
like we talk about on the scale of over again, I'm just guesstimating here, right? Like I'm not an expert, but over a couple hundred, suddenly your ability to influence things goes way down, right? So in any kind of town or city level, it just doesn't make sense anymore.
Well, I
What
get
about the
it.
military? What about the military? I'm a veteran, and I know there's
Sure.
veterans here. When one of us F's up, all of us punished. When one of us succeeds, all of us
One person
celebrate.
shits their
And
pants and
that's
everyone's
the
got to wear diapers. Yeah.
and that's the entire military quote community, and that's pretty much standard for all militaries, okay? Which is much larger than a city. There are more than 7 million people in the armed forces.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I'm not
So
okay
that
with
is a
the
poster
blanket.
child for collective
Sure.
punishment.
Yeah, I understand. But in general, and this is not always true, right? Like I can think of examples where this wasn't true at all, but I didn't think that was effective. I don't think that collective punishment in the military really was effective, right?
I
It was
think it
effective
is.
for me in my unit.
Except for on the unit level, on the small scale level. But when we talk about as the forces as a whole, I do not think it was, right?
Completely effective because each unit was subjected to collective punishment and
Yeah.
reward uniformly. And we're talking about how many? Now, I tell you what, when we had to get into combat, it worked. You
Yeah,
didn't F it
there was an
up.
but again, with the military, you're opting into this. This isn't like
Some
something that
opted in, some were drafted. Remember that?
fair.
Fair.
But again, it's different than doing this on a citywide level or a town level, even, right?
Only
Where you're
because
just
they are
living
civilians and they're not used to that. This is
Well,
a
no, I'm
socialist
talking about
system. We're talking about China, where
Sure.
everyone
But I'm talking
already
in
feels that
general.
way.
Like we don't here in the States, we don't live in a socialist system, right?
Well, we're talking about China.
Not fucking yet. But sorry, go ahead.
Not yet. I'm sorry, Wick. I know you're tired.
No, it's
I'm
okay.
here to be devil's advocate and enjoy the whispering of your beard, and I
It's
love
fine.
PrimeCayes, so
Like I said, I'm only at half my
Sure.
power level, which is okay, right?
I
That's all Prime
respect
can handle
that.
is half
Hold
Wick,
on.
half mast
Let's
Wick.
kick off a hype chain. Perk everybody up.
guys-
What do you say we do that?
That would be helpful.
I'll try.
Yeah. Subs to channel.
I'm gonna
gift bits or
start
gift
one.
subs. Yeah. Oh, that'd
I
be really
was
fun.
missing for 3 months and horrible situation, and I'm back and I'm okay. So I'm gonna try to kick the hype train.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you're safe though. I remember you were
Thank you.
having a tough situation.
It's
yeah, guys,
over now. I'm here.
If you're enjoying the content, how about the channel? Sub to the channel, get bits or get subs. It's a huge help. And follow the channel if you haven't done so yet. Hit that follow button if you haven't done that yet as well. But Wick, right? Back to you and your You infuriating me. I'm glad you're here because you're an effective villain. So
You're not wrong. Like some people really hate me these days, but it's okay.
yeah,
Um,
I don't know why. You're actually a clearly nice individual.
but uh, but I wanna address this,
Hold
right?
on, before
Because it
you
is
do, thank you, Universal Discourse, for the 5 subs. Hey, thank you for the
You
5
are welcome.
subs. That's really kind of you. Guys, support the channel
Best
if you're
thing to
liking
do.
the content. Well, we try to provide you something different every time. So there's a conversation I bet you haven't seen any other places. Thank you for the 100 bits also, Universal Discourse. I bet you haven't seen this conversation in like a while, right? Like we're trying to give you different topics. So if you think this is valuable, then support the channel. Subs channel, get bits or give subs. We get 2 more individual people. So I saw the hype train. 2 more individual people, a hype train. But okay, please, Wick, you want to address something?
Sure, yes. Like there is a substantive difference between members of a military or members of a police force or members of a specific career, right? And just civilians, just normal citizens of an area of a town that they grew up in perhaps, or that they just happen to live through the chances of birth, right? Like there's a substantive difference between these two groups, and to act as if what will work with one in these small cohesive units where they're expected to perform at a certain level, and if they don't, it leads to death, like literally death. Um,
Okay.
it's not to the same level when it comes to the civilian force. I don't think it's I think that the you trying to use the tactics we use in the military against civilians is not a good idea.
Okay, but
And then I have to ask, why don't civilians have the same contracts and relationships with their government, the same obligations? Furthermore, the government has its own obligations, whether it respects them or not. Is it not true that when a horrific member, an upstanding, trusted, loyal, respected member of the community turns out to be John Wayne Gacy, are we not then totally ashamed? How could this have happened? We lived right next door. I can't believe this. Doesn't that happen? Aren't we humiliated?
You should be, right? Like the shame
Okay,
has
well
a
then
use.
wouldn't we then deserve, in a way, aren't we collectively responsible
Again,
for not paying more attention to why this guy was running this stuff and the bad smells and this was going on for years, for instance? Are we not feeling guilt?
the
It
question
lingers.
I think the question of are you responsible is the wrong question. It's the wrong question is are you liable, right?
Oh, well,
Which
now
is what we're
that's
talking
different. That's
about
punishment.
punishment.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
guilt. I wanna wash my hands because I'm not liable. I didn't lure those boys in and cut them into pieces and stuff them in a septic tank. I didn't do that, but I watched him bring them home, and I didn't care about those boys because I heard they were gay prostitutes. I did nothing. I stood there and watched him do this, just like they watched that man tear that woman to shreds. Why wouldn't they then come under a collective something? Everybody involved in that event had something to do with the
What
outcomes of that
what
event,
punishment would you
right?
recommend be placed on
Well,
someone
I'm
who
from
has endorsed
indigenous
the right?
tradition where we have reconciliatory justice, right? But I have to ask the question. I really find it rather baffling because I'm interested in the obligation of the citizen to the state almost as fervently as many people on the left and on the right, although I'm neither. But it's an issue. Do we
No,
not have these responsibilities
again,
collectively?
I don't disagree that we have a responsibility. It's what should we be punished for if we fail to meet that responsibility?
Well, what
That's
if those
that's
people who stood and watched this man decided to punish him for having humiliated them in the face of the state? What about that?
that's called vigilante justice, right? I
Would it?
think
If
I
they had
think
strung him up, maybe. But what if they had said, "You need to do community service, you need to pay her medical bills, and we're not gonna let you come out of your house until you agree to do it, and then we wanna bring you back into the collective because you have humiliated us in the face of a very dominant government, which is very socialist, where honor is faces everything, and now look,
so.
we're all suffering because of
We
you."
have a system that deals with this, right? And instead of small individuals being able to make these decisions, we have a system of checks and balances, the judicial system, which ideally, and I recognize this doesn't happen always in practice, and that's to our shame, right? But ideally, the judicial system is a systemic way that we deal with these types of things. And so it's not just one community or one group choosing what's the punishment in this specific case. We set
We
up
have
a
a
system.
judicial system that sues parents of children who commit murder. We also have that.
Again, it's not like it sues the again. There's sometimes like, are the parents liable? You're gonna have to put me to a specific case, right?
No,
Because
they're
I
not
can't.
liable, but they're
Well,
sued. You can sue
like
them.
that we do. There is punishment for negligence, right? And we recognize that if you, for example, leave your gun unlocked, your kid gets a hold of it.
Okay.
Yeah, and you don't properly care for your gun or something, your kid gets a hold of it and they shoot someone, you are
Mhm.
partially responsible, and you are partially legally responsible, as I understand it. I'm not a legal scholar.
There could
And
be a
in
case of that,
yeah.
but that's usually not the case in these suits. Yeah. You've got a kid that's a psychopath, and he becomes, he shoots his family members and murders half of his schoolmates. That's the parents' fault. And they're sued. Sued. That's interesting. The child is put into the justice system, but the parents are then sued. Somehow the community claims that the damages done to it were so heinous that
Yeah,
that warrants
again,
suing them.
like I'd have to look at each specific, like in some
What about
cases the
suing a
suit,
gun manufacturer?
right?
That's
Suing gun
bigger.
manufacturer.
That's better. All right.
I think that again, like as long as um
What about
I'll
suing?
I don't know. I don't like that. I
Mhm.
don't like suing a gun manufacturer just because their product was used in a heinous crime, right? Like,
Okay,
do we sue the owner? Do we sue a Ford owner or the
so
Ford manufacturer because they drove through a crowd? No,
sure.
that's
What about yeah. So if you're honestly concerned about this, right? What about having a situation in which uh when you're it's a corporation and they have been perfect one, Abbott, right? Abbott, which has created the baby formula brand, and because of their negligence, a kids got sick, and I'm not sure if they died, but they were at least sick. And then beyond that, because it seems to be again their negligence, they allowed their factory to get contaminated, even though it was known previously that this was a problem, and they did nothing about it, and they had to shut down the factory, and it helped cause the baby shortage of baby formula shortage, a baby shortage as well. So what about suing them? Okay, and understand that if you sue them, if you do that, there will be like a loss of jobs, right? So like you're going to sue them for a certain amount of money, and that factory, because of this company taking this financial hit, there's going to be job cuts. The individuals within that factory, the workers, most of them, they didn't have the power to affect any of that. None of it. But they just came to work. They did what they were told. Maybe some of them even recognized the problem and reported the problem, right? But they still might be up for losing a job because that problem was not addressed. So understanding that people will be hurt in this particular scenario, would you be for being able to sue that company? Should that company?
Yes, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
Right? Because there is a degree of separation between the effects of your actions and the intent of your actions. You're here to punish the company, the corporation itself, for negligence, which I think we need to be able to do in order to make sure that corporations in this capitalist system, right, that only cares about money, minds their P's and Q's, right? Yes, there are knockoff effects. Yes, there are unintended consequences. Like the goal, the intent of the punishment isn't to get those people fired, right? That's not your goal here. We understand that that might happen. That probably will happen. But I think the degree of separation here means it's ethically okay to do, in my opinion. So.
Because it results in what? Radical change in company policy. They pull the product off, they relabel it, they resell it, everybody keeps their jobs, or that's really tricky. That one's a thick one. But yeah, I think it's still relevant.
I think that I think that these consequences that you're talking about, the consequences that that results from that lawsuit and the scenario that I've set up, because oftentimes that doesn't actually happen. We don't necessarily lose our jobs because some company got sued.
Yeah.
But in the one that I set up, I think the consequences there are significantly more severe than what I set out for a group punishment, right? Significantly more severe. But you're okay with it. You're okay with people losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, rather than, hey, we lost a tax break. Collectively, a city lost a single fucking tax break.
Okay.
That's fascinating.
Like phrasing it as okay with it is a little unfair, right? I'm not. I don't like it.
I asked if you're okay with it. That's what I said.
Okay. I don't like. I'm not okay with the fact that people are getting fired, right? But like that's not okay. But it is a necessary consequence because that isn't the intent. That isn't the target, right? Like we aren't. I would not be okay, for example, if because a factory failed its inspection or what have you, or failed its health check, for everyone in that factory to be fired, right? If that was the direct consequence, no, I would not be okay with that, right? But because in the scenario you put out, they sued the company was held liable, they had to pay out, and as a indirect consequence of that, they had to lay off all these workers. Do you see the degree of separation there?
I see the
That there's a
separation you're
single
talking about.
degree, right?
Yeah.
But like,
There does seem to be a nuance there.
But,
There are
yeah.
some distinctions. But in
it's-
principle though, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. Yeah, obviously it's not the same fucking thing. It's a different thing. But the consequences are worse, right? Because what you were concerned about were well, I guess you were concerned about a few things. But part of them were the consequences that would be levied against these individuals, right? Which is why you made that there was a difference between when we thought that people might get arrested, for the community service thing, right? Where if people refused, then the consequences would be they'd be arrested, rather than simply a city, right, that loses an honorary title, right? That's a consequence, right? And this other one is a consequence. But you realize one of those consequences was heavier. And now I give you a third option in which people are losing their livelihoods. And you're like, no, that's okay, because the target itself wasn't those individuals. I mean, they're going to get hurt. We know they're going to get hurt because I set up the situation, but we know they're going to get hurt. But that part's okay. They can lose the ability to put food on their table, right? That part's all right. But, losing that tax break because we directly targeted the city for this. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Okay, well, maybe I'll clear it up here, right? It's the same reason I'm okay with the collective punishment of losing an honorary status in the city, right? Because again, that's targeted against the city officials. It's not targeted, as I understand it, against the individuals within that city itself. And even though there may be things that come out of it that are bad, like Yudi outlined, where loss of trade deals, loss of business, loss of things like loss of tourism or what have you. Yeah, those may lead to worse consequences than a tax break. It's the concept that is important here. It's not only the effects. The effects are just one part of the equation. It's the concepts behind it. It's who's being targeted. It's the intent. All these things play a factor in how I come up with whether I think it's okay or not in these hypotheticals.
So
that makes sense, at least.
Well, it's
right?
for clarity. You've said I don't believe in collective punishment, but then you said except in some cases. So actually,
Sure.
Are you actually totally against collective punishment
Obviously
in
not if it's
principle?
okay in some cases, but I think that
Okay.
in general, no, there are exceptions where I would be okay with it.
Okay.
Uh,
Just clarification. Thanks.
Mhm.
I
we
appreciate
have
Are
it.
a
you
new.
okay with the
Yes.
dishonorary
Hello.
status in China? Hello,
Hi, oh, I'm
Leaky
sorry,
Water
what did you
Kai.
say? Can you repeat?
I'm saying, are you okay with the dishonorary status of the city in China?
As I understand it, I understand that the loss of status in China and in Asian cultures especially is different than the loss of status in America, right? But I think that the punishment levied out in this case, again, as I understand it, affects primarily the city officials, right? And it
Did you
does
see the
not,
video?
yes, the one
Okay,
that
great.
yes, the one that Prime played at least. hmm I think that losing the honorary status in this case, again, the reason I'm okay with it is I understand it. And again, if it, I change my mind and I will change my stance on this if I find out it means more than this, right?
Is
But
there
as
It's
I
going to
understand it,
affect the standing of the city in itself and the people that are in that city, along with the officials that are in that city. It will not just affect the officials, just for the record.
okay, so what other than loss of status, will there be any material punishment or penalty applied to these individuals within the city?
They're considered different urban areas in China. So you have different classes that are classified within the entirety of the city. So middle class, second class, third class, so on and so forth. These people are now being considered on the bottom tier of that.
Then
right?
in that
That's why
case,
it
I
is a collective
I
punishment.
understand. In that
Right.
case, right, like I may not understand enough about the nuance of this to actually make a substantive claim here, right? Like, and thank you for that
Okay.
information. But but again, I'm just going from the small article I read. I admitted that
So
Mhm.
initially.
okay, so Waterkai, I want to know what your thoughts on this, and why do you think Wick is so very, very wrong?
The parallel I
Jeez.
can get to is the 90s drug war, where
Okay.
collective punishment was put upon African Americans down to the
hmm
disparity of crack cocaine versus powdered cocaine,
hmm
and what was intent to sell, what was done by police, the entire police state in general.
Sure, I mean, like I said, all throughout this, I've been pretty against collective punishment almost across the board. There's only been a few situations, like a police precinct with a heavy corruption that I mentioned with maybe 100 employees. They all have to be fired and rehired. I'm okay with that. I am not okay with something like a food, like mandatory civil, civil service if you don't meet a certain standard. I'm not okay with that, right? In the case of the drug war has been horrendous for a multitude of reasons, and that just being one, that it specifically target minority groups, right? Like there are other reasons that drug war is also bad, but this idea of collective punishment, that's a great example of why collective punishment is something that we should be very wary of at the very least.
But for some reason in this country, we tend to applaud it depending on the circumstances and the people involved.
Yo,
So it's
I
not
True.
so much just
It's
an
true.
instance of what the crime is. Like, I can give a really simple example. Donald Trump took issue with the Central Park Five because those were
hmm
people of color. But
hmm
at no point throughout his history has he spoken about any atrocity that was done by anyone that was not of color.
you're preaching to the choir, my friend. Like, look, this tend to essentialize groups and to punish them is something we see in small ways and big, right? Like I know a lot of people will essentialize all conservatives or all Trump voters. Like they're all the same. They all need the same punishment. They all should be locked up. That's bad as well, right? Like
It's
anytime you essentialize a group and you say every single member of that group is responsible for a single member of that group's actions,
yeah.
that's a bad idea.
That's the only good Indian is a dead Indian.
Ooh. But
Um,
I don't consider collective community service a punishment. I consider it a benefit and a boon to mankind.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the issue comes with coerced. When it's
It would
coerced,
have to be coerced. Who would want to do it
Right,
voluntarily?
right,
people
right,
do.
right.
Like you do not think that people volunteer for food pantries and food shelters, homeless shelters? You do not think they have volunteers?
Uh-huh.
Well, no, I'm thinking more in the spirit of the DMV. No matter how rich or how poor you are, you pretty much got to go to the DMV at some point, or you got to go to jury
Well,
duty at
jury
some
duty,
point.
yeah.
DMV is
Jury
like the
duty is
punishment.
coerced. So you're going to consider going to the DMV a punishment, but this is where we all meet and rub elbows. This is where we get to the crux of human interaction,
Mm-hmm.
where the prince and the pauper meet.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a punishment. This is humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be clear, you're for what are you advocating for here?
I'm not advocating for anything in
Right.
particular,
Okay.
but I think collective civil service would be good
Mm-hmm.
on a whole, but I don't consider it a punishment. And you made it a point like it would be a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Whereas
certain
at this point, only
forms of it, yeah.
criminals do civil service in that sense.
I'm sorry, repeat yourself.
Only criminals tend to do civil service in the form of, roadside cleanup, things like
Mhm.
that. I think that should be
Coerced
all of us.
service. Right. Right.
So again, when we get down to like, if someone does not, for whatever reason, want to participate in this civil service, and again, there are exceptions that we recognize: taxes, jury duty, a few other things, right? That we're okay with, but we're not okay. We would not be okay with everything, right? There are certain things that you would not, I would imagine you would not be okay with. You wouldn't be okay with mandatory for everyone to go out for 2 weeks out of the year and do military training, right? I don't think you would be okay with that being a
That's another
coercive thing.
thing I mentioned in the chat. A few countries, Korea and Israel, I can say for sure off the top of my head, have mandatory military service.
They do.
Turkey and
Yeah,
I
France
don't
as well.
think that's a bad idea.
I do.
But because our country's so politicized, it
Mhm.
becomes an issue. We're a warmongering country. So when I
Mhm.
became of military age, it was when Bush 2 was in office.
Mm.
I scored great on the ASVAB, and I was like, no, I'm probably going to catch friendly fire. So I opted against it, but I shouldn't have been able to. I was able-bodied and should have had to go.
No, I disagree with you. I did serve, right? I served for 6 years in the Air Force.
Mhm.
I think that making that kind of thing a mandatory thing. Like, one of the reasons that our military is the greatest in the world is because it's strictly volunteer. There's some drafting, right? There's some draft issues in the 70s and things like that. But yeah, it's strictly volunteer, and that's one of the reasons it's great, right? That's one of the reasons it's strong. Like, mandatory, it sounds good, right? And it might work for smaller countries, but it just wouldn't work here. I think it'd lead to bad outcomes.
The draft here would be. Yep, but I don't know if he's talking about the draft. It's
No,
more
I'm
like
talking about
conscription.
I think he's talking like something like Israel
A
has, right?
mandatory conscription where you do 2 years as civil service with military training, and then you're free to go on to college. You're free to do whatever else, right? It's considered, your obligation. France, Turkey as well do the same. And the opinions of that run the gamut of I hated it, I can't stand it, and I'm the person I am today because of that, right?
Yeah. I just want to
Yeah.
make it clear, like, voluntary civil service is great. I'm with it. I think, like, we should be advocating for more
Okay.
people to do civil service and work with their communities. But as soon as we force certain things, I have problems.
We're getting far off topic because we keep
A little.
considering things that are good for humanity as punishments.
Right.
How would it lessen the impact of the homeless situation if we had conscription like that in America? These people would have access to benefits.
Mm-hmm.
It would help in the long haul.
Do
If
you know
all
how many homeless
Americans,
veterans there are?
this is a very different issue.
Is it?
This isn't just veterans. These are people that just had to, like, if you were talking about people like they were in the National Guard,
Mm-hmm.
It's not like regular veterans that actually experience
Right.
mental stress and are abandoned by the VA.
Right.
I mean, I just think that, like, look, a lot of National Guard actually went overseas, right? Their units were mobilized, they were sent over for a period of time, and they suffered too, right? It was
Yeah,
less
they
likely, yeah, but they
more.
suffered too.
They've suffered more.
Fair.
So they shouldn't have been deployed in the first place, but we're
And
not proposing that they're deployed, but that they're National
again,
Guard. They stay domestic.
like, the reason we focus on punishment, the only reason I focus on punishment is because the question remains, like, I see it to your point that all these things are good, that all the, like, I like civil service, but the question becomes, what if someone doesn't want to do it? And if the solution to that is a form of punishment, that's an issue. Then we got to look into it. Is the
It's Cersei Lannister. Shame.
I don't know. I think somehow that line of reasoning in my mind seems somehow confused.
How so?
It seems to almost start to contradict itself. I
Why?
could be wrong. That's how I'm trying to track, and I'm going. I got you. I've got you. I don't have you.
Okay, well, let's
Might be
maybe
tired
let's go a bit
or
slower. Yeah,
going
maybe
back
I'm tired.
to the actual hypothetical and collective punishment. Should we have collective punishment? Who should pay for bad behavior? And exploring collective punishment, right? And just staying in that little space, you know.
Exactly.
So we don't kind of drift a bit.
Well,
Because I'm tracking you. Yeah.
Let's look at it this way. Say there was some mandatory civil service, and in the spirit of collective punishment, so you could go to the soup kitchen every week, right? As you're supposed to, but say not enough of the people in your community participated in this, right? And so your entire community lost the benefit that was supposed to be given, right? And so you basically got nothing for all the time that you put in to this. Like, you were punished, even though you did what you were supposed to do. You were punished because not enough of your fellows did it. How are you going to, like, do you see how this might lead to bad outcomes?
Well, it sounds like somebody mismanaged something, and then you have to deal with it. Okay. Community service is collective punishment. I guess that's what this is.
No, he's saying something different though. He's saying something different.
Okay.
Our friend Wick here is saying that the community service is the action that we're taking and we're judging on. And the punishment is that.
Let's take jury duty. Okay, let's take jury duty for example.
And the punishment is what?
Well, we can get to that. Like,
I'm waiting for him to finish his.
Oh, fair enough. Say not enough people in your community showed up for jury.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
And now you are to be punished for that? That would be her.
I'm still feeling like that's very slippery slope stuff. That's like, wow.
Like, okay, so far you haven't really, I haven't heard, I may have missed it, given a concrete form of collective punishment. Everything just seems like it's negligible.
This runs the gamut because it's hypothetical, right? Like,
well, no, it's not hypothetical. What happened in China to this province is collective punishment. These things happen. There are collective punishments against minorities. I've given multiple examples.
Yes, but
of collective punishment.
Like the collective punishment against, like the drug war, the collective punishments that were done in the drug war is, I think, on a much different level. Like this is a spectrum we're talking about, and certain places on the spectrum I'm okay with, certain places I'm not. So when you ask what's the punishment, like hypothetically name one, and I'll tell you if I'm okay with it.
So again, you go Waterkai. If you're going to say something, I'll wait for you.
No time for draft dodging.
Again, that wasn't a collective punishment. That was individual. It's the person who dodged the draft. What collective punishment is advocating for is if enough people in your town dodged the draft, everyone in that town suffered the consequences, right? Like that would No, I don't like
So
that at all.
collective punishment is punishment in itself. What is inflicted upon the collective is what the punishment is. And it can get more severe based on their rebellion against said punishment.
You're escalating things beyond where I was taking it, necessarily, Waterkai. First of all, I like it because then it because Wick hates it more. But we can work on what I think I had a pretty good one, though there could be a better one out there, but like a tax break, okay? Tax break is something pretty simple. And it doesn't necessarily involve people going to jail. It doesn't involve people getting hurt or the possibility of getting hurt, right? Like if you're within military military service, there's a possibility you can get hurt. Even if you're not going to be doing a combat role, you're just in a more dangerous situation one way or the other. So like a tax break for not doing so the jury service thing that you talked about, okay? Not enough people do jury service, not enough people are showing up for that, and we lose a tax break. I guess my only problem with that is that I mean, I guess that's an example, but like I think it would make sense to be judging things on judging the town on something that that, like you said, they can have a bit more control over, right? So rather than an individual who gets a who gets a notice, right? And the town doesn't. No one in the town knows they got this notice, right? And no one in the town knows if they responded to that notice, right? Like, what do you mean, like everyone?
Public information. Everyone knew.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Well, that's a little different then. If that's the case, then maybe I'm for it then. If we like publicize, okay, that Prime and Wick have gotten a notice, and then Wick, being a deadbeat, did not go to his jury duty, right? Like typical of Wick, honestly. So he didn't go to jury duty. Okay, that's a bit different then, because now if we know that we could take action, then maybe neighbors, we're talking. They just like not even bringing it up in a corrosive manner, like, oh, you've got jury duty, interesting, Wick, right? Like, are you excited about it, right? So then there's some interaction because everyone knows this is a thing that's that you're up for,
Let me give you the situation then, right? Like we're talking about going to jury duty. You're like, I'm super excited. I'm gonna go, and I'm mentioning like, you know what? I'm gonna skip out, and you're like, whoa, dude, I really need that tax break. Right, like that's how I'm going to pay for my my upgrade to my camera on my stream, right? So everyone can see my face in better HD. Like, and I'm like, well, I don't care, right? This incentivizes you to do some kind of horrific things to incentivize me to get to my jury duty, right? Like this kind of incentivizes some, some like
what?
Well, if you don't go, I'm going to beat you up, Wick. I'm going to punch you in the face until
cut your tires, man.
Right? Like I'm going, I'm going to cut your tires. I'm going to I'm going to make you wear a yellow star, right, on your shirt.
Oh my God! Oh,
ouch!
Like,
why?
But you see what we're talking. We're a scarlet letter. Let's to be more literary and less like you wear a scarlet letter like Wick, so everyone knows your shame, right? It's not a good thing. I hate to do this because this is a great conversation. I love you all, and it's nice to meet you. What was your name?
Waterkai.
Waterkai.
Very nice to meet you, but I gotta go. I'm tired, man. But I've loved
Sleep
this
well, brother.
It's
been great.
Yeah,
I'll see you guys later, and I'll talk to you guys again.
Yeah, thanks for coming through. Always appreciate talking to you, buddy. It was a really good time. And I'd love to see you again. I'm always hitting you up, so.
Of course.
But ultimately, my answer was shame them. We all shame them as hard as possible.
Shame. I love you guys. Love you all. To your audience, if you want to find me at twitch.tv/Death of Certainty, you certainly can. And remember, ACAB includes Thought Police. See you guys later.
Bye. Okay.
Good night,
Um,
buddy.
so
I think we all agree.
I'm not sure. Because Universal Discourse was, you've changed your mind around within this conversation. So I'm curious where you stand right now.
Collective punishment. I have grown up in my culture has something in a form of collective, well, not exactly punishment, but collective action. I was in the military. I know what collective punishment feels like. For China to remove the honor of the territory is completely humiliating for that province. It doesn't just affect the governors, it's everyone. Am I against collective punishment? It sure is effective. Am I worried that the government or governor of some type could abuse that, with these slippery slopes that he was putting out? Yeah, that's certainly possible. But I come from a perspective where there's obligation in relationships. Okay. And where if one of us gets hurt, all of us gets hurt relationally. So, I think my whole thing is I'm not so hot on punishment. That term that makes me ask, well, who has the right to determine who gets punished? And why isn't there another way besides, quote, punishing a person to get that accomplished? That's what I actually think. Punishment is not I'm not punitive. I'm not a punitive person. I also think that the idea of conscription for 2 years, I'm actually in favor of that. I think that the civilian sector should find out what that feels like. Okay, to be part of a collective like that. That's probably their only chance in their lifetime they'll ever get to do it. So I kind of came in to be a bit of a devil's advocate. And with this new research there, collective consequence, collective action, I understand. Punishment. Ouch. I don't want to see collective punishment, but it's incredibly effective. I'm not going to lie. So that's exactly how I feel.
Collective incentivization, though.
Incentivization. Some guy did this. We take away your honor, as I understand it. And now we have an incentive for you to, rectify the situation. I think that kind of move is conducive. It opens the door for incentivization because nobody wants to be collectively punished for something they didn't do. So to come out and say, well, we have to take you off the list because you don't meet the criteria. Okay, correct. True. But here, we're going to give you an incentive. That means we're going to give you another chance to get back into that status. I don't really see that I don't see the incentive as punishment. So I'm much more in favor of an incentive. And I think that punishment has to be the last resort, especially when it's collective. So that's right where I stand right now.
Mordecai, do you have a difference between her and your opinion?
I don't believe punishments in general create good outcomes.
Right.
So there should be some other alternative where a person should feel incentivized to give back or to do something to atone for situations that have happened, whatever they may be. I would think that would be more constructive society, and having conscription, things like that, actually fixes the gaps that we have in our educational systems and other systems that we have in place that creates a certain form of equality.
Okay, so I'll address your conscription point. First of all, are you set on it being military conscription, or would you be fine with
some sort of civil service, perhaps?
Something that can give you any sort of vocation or some sort of benefit, be it healthcare benefits, anything for having done that service.
Okay.
It gives you some sort of leg up.
Okay. All right. But it's mandatory though.
Mm-hmm.
There can always be exceptions. If you really have a reason where you could not be in that environment, like bone spurs per se, I'm going to let that slide.
People who are disabled, what if they couldn't perform civil service?
Like myself.
Okay. Also, on the same token, a person who's disabled and is often discriminated against, mandatory civil service, which is going to have to accommodate, okay, across the board, might be the only chance a disabled person could have to seek a productive endeavor to work alongside everyone else. There's two sides to that, at least. There's an upside and a downside. There's always a caveat, but it's intriguing. But the issue is but it's mandatory in a nation that prides itself on its liberties and freedoms and ignores its discrimination.
Well, a lot like what happened in Appalachia, where they were teaching people coding skills. People that are disabled physically could be taught coding skills by the government.
True.
And be utilized for the government or for whatever it may be.
Whatever. Right. Right.
So,
is it?
Go ahead.
Isn't it a worthy price, do you think, maybe, to come closer to some kind of equity?
I would just think it would lead fewer people into despair where they don't have any means of upward mobility. They would have skills that were imposed upon them if they feel that way. And if they happen not to be adequate for those services, then they're opted out.
If they don't meet the criteria. Okay. I think there might be some divergence in the point that I actually feel that when people, exist in any entity, that there are obligations, that there are promises made back and forth in an exchange, and that all parties involved are equally just as responsible, whether they lifted a finger, that they're all equally affected, even if they want to claim otherwise. I don't believe that's true.
So it's true, but you don't have to care.
You don't have to. You can be conscripted in the civil service, but you do not have to like it. You do not have to care because, nobody said that was the law. But there's something to be said for promises made. There's something to be said for the obligation and affiliation of relationship in your agency. And there's something to be said with shared experience,
So,
I'm iffy on it, but I think my take on that is unpopular because of my cultural background. But and that's fine.
No idea of your cultural background at all.
We're indigenous, so they describe us as anarcho-collectivists, of all things.
That's
we are
gorgeous.
Collective. It isn't, because if one of us F's up, we all get hurt for it. That's why they round us all up and put us on reservations. So, okay. So what happens in our activism, right? In AIM, right? I was a member of AIM, and Russell Means was just the hothead, and everybody was terrified. They were like, God, he's going to get us all killed. Sure enough, right? It impacted all of Indian country. Somehow, he is vindicated, and it changed everything. He took the risk, and Leonard Peltier is still sitting and rotting away in jail because somebody had to pay. So when I say I know what it feels like, right, to be collectively punished, I know what it feels like.
It's the downside of being the lower distillation of the population. The smaller you are in the population, when the punishment comes down, it hits that much harder, which is why on the Black community, it's equally disgusting because the disproportionate amount of us in jail is
you and us.
Ridiculous.
Yous and us, black and red. That you want to go to a prison? Look for that. That's what the color of the flag
Native American in a prison
Asian
in America is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, Oh yeah. Why
They
aren't we
should
the
be
same
submitted
people
back
by
to the
now?
tribe.
I want to know if we're collectively punished for being basically the people that say, I ain't going to take this no more. I'm going to stand up and defend myself. How come we're not the same people by now? Right? I think that's what, with individualism, we don't all want to be lumped into the same box. If my neighbor did that crap, that's my neighbor's house, man. I don't want to be responsible for John Wayne Gacy. Totally
Well,
don't.
take the
But,
lens in a different direction and flip it
mhm,
toward white America, who happen to be the
uh-oh.
majority, well, mostly the majority in America, and put a collective punishment on all of them versus the distillation between the two lowest population.
If there's a
How would that
collective
turn out?
oh God, I'm going to let you say that. I think I don't even
It would be
speculate on
January
that.
6th. It would be January 6th.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Oh, okay. I'll go with that. Yeah.
It
And that's,
actually happened.
yep. And the research findings from working with them is this article. People hurt other people to signal their goodness. So when the government and state acts in a way to collectively punish, they're signaling their virtue. They're signaling their goodness. When
Yes,
people
in a
refuse
lot
to
of
participate in violence, they signal their goodness. When a man beats a woman as a man in a hyper-masculine society because she hurt his face, okay? She cost him his face and he must take action. He was signaling his goodness to certain people. They were all doing that. All of them thought they were right. Are they?
Well, I mean,
Right?
When your buddy votes against your candidate, and the ferocity that we saw in 2016, families divided over that, fights, people killing each other over that. They both thought they were right. Were they? Is bad behavior, or is it
I-
self-defense?
I'm a little confused.
Well,
Clarify, please.
these questions on this, like when they was talking about not doing your hey buddy, you have to do that jury duty because I need that tax break. Hey buddy, you have to vote for this candidate or we're all fucked, man. I can't believe, you know, and bang, and the ferocity and the attacks that start and the doxing that starts, and that we saw that happen in 2016. That was one incident. It was the same
Okay,
thing.
I see where you're
Shoot.
going. I see where you're
See?
going.
Yeah, it's like you and everybody voted for that asshole. I'm gonna burn your house down. I can't believe this, and I'm like, woo! A collective punishment of a certain group, a class of voters. Collective
So,
punishment isn't just that,
are you talking about for Trump
you know,
voters?
between in the 2016 elections, the devotion to all the candidates, Bernie backed out, I think, at one point, but
Didn't
yeah, the
back out.
whole
He got
who you
slapped.
voted for really got ugly on that one. That one got bad. I mean, it
Well, yeah,
split
because it was
families.
nearly a 50% divide in America.
The Civil War.
I
All
wouldn't go
Southerners must
that
be
far.
collectively punished, correct? I mean, we've seen collective punishment in America that looked an awful lot like what happened in China. And what China did was simply remove them off a list. And then
Well,
there
the
was
deal
perhaps
was,
protectors in it.
this is why I bring this up. The whole deal in
Mm,
China was a group of thugs,
right.
literally a gang in that region, getting
hmm
turned down by a woman, and their collective beating the crap out of the woman and any woman that came there or any man that came there to do something about it.
Right.
The whole city caught heat for that action. It's not the
Correct.
same as a collective vibe of, oh, we kind of want our slaves because we like money
Yeah.
and we shouldn't be punished for that. Versus
Right.
these assholes did it.
Right.
It was this handful of assholes. We could string them up for you right now, but we're going to get wrecked by the Chinese government. And that's why China is so brutal.
Yeah.
China just completely disavows their entire outland. There's more people in China than you even want to believe, but their outland isn't even acknowledged. The Uyghur people aren't even acknowledged.
hmm And it makes me wonder whether, in the community's eyes, were these men atypical? Was this behavior unusual? Had they seen it many, many times before?
yes and no. Gang activity is gang activity.
True.
So what horrible gang people do is different from what normal citizens do.
They're
So
outside of this, right?
should Compton be punished for what their gang do? They don't want their gangs there. So the government should be educating people and bringing people out of the mindset of needing to be in a gang, because you only join a gang because you need something to belong to and something to protect you.
Yes. Do you remember the Yakuza? What was done
Yeah,
in
they're
that
still
case?
there.
Do you remember them? And they went from gang boss to corporate boss. They put them in charge to bring
Well,
them
that's
back as
because,
productive citizens. Remember that?
yeah, well, Japan has a different,
Mm-hmm.
a different, what do you call it, relationship with their gangsters. They will
Yes, they
actually
do.
cooperate with their gangsters versus what other countries tend to do on a
That's
whole.
right. The
Whereas in
Yakuza were
America,
one samurai, right?
America will work with the cartel, but won't work with black gangsters.
Ah,
They'll
So
work with the mafia, but they won't work with the Cubans.
right, right, right. So it seems that there are, well, Wick said spectrum, which I hate that word, but there seems that there are nuances and there are degrees, and because reasons. But to me, I'm seeing that collective punishment. It may take different forms, perhaps, but it's been enacted over and over and over again, and people do it too with vigilante. That's kind of a collective punishment.
Yeah,
Racism in
but
itself is a
Asians are
collective
catching it.
punishment, you know? Right? Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
even though
So,
Asians are catching it, we're still catching it bigger.
yeah. Yeah. The
yes.
tragedy of Japan is they have the best food in the world, but weed is illegal. Okay. That's it. Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like we kind of wanted there a bit. But
Mhm.
um, I the whole point of the punishment is to create a collective sense of duty. That we're
Mhm.
all in this together. So I
Mhm.
guess I'm not married to necessarily a punishment, or any particular format, as long as it
Mhm.
encourages a sense that we're all in this together, and that when
Mhm.
things go wrong, that this is a mark against us all,
Mhm.
and I think one to have that on a national scale would actually be pretty interesting,
Mhm.
because I'm curious as to what policies that might lead to, if we consider some things to be national disasters, in which case they are, right? Like the state of
Mhm.
healthcare currently,
Mhm.
the state of like childhood poverty, and
Mhm.
poverty in general, honestly. It seems to me that would be a benefit if we felt the need to address these things in in a collective fashion, right? Obviously, and because these are things that can only be solved by the collective, but
Yeah.
with the mindset that you see among, especially on the right, but not just on the right, that pull yourself up by your bootstraps, rather than hey, you are experiencing a problem, right? And I am my brother's keeper. I am the person
Mhm.
who will look out for you, like this, like even when it comes to things like taxes, where taxes should go, right? Like people will argue, well, I don't my kid doesn't go to the public school, so why should I have to pay for a public school, right? Something as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We won't care, right? Like, what we can complain about public schools. Oh, public schools are failing. At the same time, I also don't want to fund them at all. So like, why should I bother, right? Why should I bother paying for other people's kids? And that,
Wow.
yeah, like this kind of mindset, it absolutely kills me. It's kind of mindset. It I think that
Wow.
tragedies happen with that kind of mindset, where we can so easily dismiss one, the suffering of individuals, but even then, not even people aren't quote unquote suffering, their deprivation, the fact that they lose access to these things, and you don't, right? So like again, like this idea of
Right.
changing how we see ourselves, relationship to our
Uh-huh.
society, I think
Uh-huh.
that's where the value comes in. And yeah, that's where the value comes in.
Oh, you seldom take a position like that where it's so clearly polarized like that. But I've got to say, in this case, I have to very much in alignment with that. That we're all in this together. And you kind of want that sense of, you called it duty, which then suddenly that definitely relates to military members who have a duty to serve as a duty. So yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that, to be honest. Really am. But I got to say, I'm in alignment with that, which is unusual for me. So
Mhm.
you guys are winning me over. It's bad. I got to go back to the res and get my shit together, right? Shut.
um,
Oh, the problem is that so many people don't believe
Duty.
that we are all in this together. So there was a study that happened like January of this year of Wharton students that believe the average American income is $100,000.
mm,
So that's why I brought up The Simpsons. There was an episode where they were in war back in World War II, and Grandpa Simpson and Burns and all of them were in the same platoon. And the way Burns acted in comparison to the rest of his platoon spells out what we're dealing with in America altogether. The rich don't feel that they're in it with us. They can deny climate change as long as they make money. Certain
right,
classes should be forced, for the most part, and I don't believe we should go down to social credits or anything crazy like what
right.
China will eventually get to, but they should have some incentive to have to commingle with their fellow man to see what the equilibrium is.
It
Everyone should
is.
see what the equilibrium is.
It is. And how is that automatically perceived as a punishment? I mean, being
If you were rich, would it not be
mandated
a punishment for
into.
you?
Right. Right. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, if you were rich, if you were a Kardashian kid or like
The
basically
Koch
Burns in The
brothers. Right.
Simpsons, rich people, wouldn't you consider having to go and deal with the stinky people a punishment?
Certain rich people, yes.
A large chunk of very, which are a minor. I
Yeah,
don't even know what to say. Are they a minority
I
at
got
this
it.
point?
They're like the 1% of 1%, something like that. Yeah,
Okay, just making sure.
yeah.
Okay. It's a bit of a slow night tonight. I think we've
Yep.
kind of run this topic a bit into the ground. So how about this? Well, we'll be back in the future. Everyone, thanks for being here. We'll be back. Thanks for stopping by. Hit the follow button if you've been enjoying this content. We
Mhm.
always try to do something different for you. So hit the follow button, exposure social or chat. For our social media, uh, hit us up. Chat was fun. I just sorry about that. Yeah,
Mm.
kamikaze. Oh well. But yeah, we'll see you in the future. Hit us up on our social media. And we will see you again. I'm gonna send it off to our friend Universal Discourse here, who is
Oh, okay.
streaming, right? Yeah. So everyone, be
Hey.
kind to our friend Universal Discourse. She's amazing. We love
I
her,
am.
and we're thankful that she's
Thank
back
you.
and that she's
Thank
safe.
you. I'm
So,
happy to be anywhere. I'm happy to continue this conversation. I'm doing a stream-a-thon. So
oh,
come on over.
okay, yeah.